Hello and welcome back. In this video, we want to add the unit tests to Auth service. But if you recall, I already said that we're only going to be adding one unit test per service. Now for the Auth service, the unit test we're going to add will be added to the current user controller. Okay, so you can decide to add unit tests to the other controllers, but we are going to add only for the current user. Okay. Now, the first thing we need to do, because we already have the setup, okay, so here we have just configurations, okay, so we made the necessary changes here. We don't need to change anything again, okay, so we have the just configurations. If I go to package JSON, make sure we have the types installed. Yeah, we have them. Okay, so now let's go into our controllers. In the controllers, I'll create a folder called test. Okay, what we are going to do is first, let's just create the mock file that we are going to use to test this current user. Okay, so inside the test, the file I'm going to create is, or I will rather create a folder. Okay, I'll call this mocks, and then inside the folder I'll create a file called auth.mock.ts. okay, so what do we need to mock? Because here we are going to be making some HTTP requests, we need to mock the HTTP request and the HTTP response. Now it's possible, I didn't check though, there are libraries that you can use to mock HTTP request and response. Okay, probably also for Express or related to Express, but instead I just found it easier to just set up my own mocking functions. So we're going to mock the request, mock the response, and then mock some data that will be sent or received. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is let me create the interfaces. Okay, we're going to create some interfaces. The first one is going to be the JWT interface, so I'll say export interface IJWT. okay, so this is the interface, or maybe I can make it IJWT. Oh, I think this looks much better. Okay, so here will just be JWT optional of type string. Okay, so this is the first interface. Remember, in our session we usually have request.session.jwt. okay, and then the next one is the auth mock, so I'll say export interface auth mock. Okay, so this here we're going to just add the mocking data that we want. Okay, username, or we can add ID. Okay, ID optional is going to be a number. Then we add username, so all the properties will be optional. String, email, string as well. Then password, optional as well, is going to be a string. Okay, so maybe for now we can just use this. Okay, if we need to add more information to this, I can add created at. Okay, it's going to be a date or a string. Okay, and then there are other informations you can add, like password. Let's just use this for now, then later we update. Let's add the auth payload. So now the data that we are going to use, export const, I'll call this auth user payload of type auth payload. Remember the payload that we usually add to our token when we sign the token. Okay, we need ID, I'll say 1, username, just add anything, email, okay, test.com, and then the value IAT. Yeah, we can just add some random values. Okay, so this auth payload, let me fix this issue. If we go to our service or services right here, if we scroll down, yeah, it's the payload we are passing to this sign token, that is ID, email, username. Okay, so that is what we are mocking a response right here. And then the auth mock, okay, I'll create export const. I'll call this auth mock. So this is just going to be some values that we will likely get. ID 1, profile public ID. Okay, just some random data. Username. Okay, email. Okay, at test.com, and then country. So these are information that that is returned when we create a user. Okay, so that is what I'm just adding right here. Profile picture, we can set that to empty. Okay, and we can set email verified, so we can set the user to be already verified one. Created at. Okay, you can add a date, whatever random date. Okay, and then something like this, just add time, hour, minutes, seconds, .451z. This is just some random dates. Okay, and then we can add compare password. Remember that we added compare password method to our auth model prototype, and then hash password. Now this will return false. Okay, now this is going to be of type auth document. I think I need to cast it as, yeah, so we need to first cast it as unknown and then cast it as auth document. Okay, so sometimes you have to just cast the object as unknown and then cast it to what you actually expect. Now that we have these properties, let's go ahead and add our request and response. They're going to be very easy. Now, when sending a request, we need some objects. Okay, so I'll call this auth request. Okay, and in the object we need a session data, and the session data will be of type IJWT. Okay, and then we need a body. Okay, you remember if we're sending a post request, we usually send data in the request body, and the request body will be of type auth mock. Later, if we need to update auth mock, we will do that. And then we want to set current user. So I'll say current user is going to be optional auth payload or null. Okay, so current user will be of type auth payload or null. And then params, remember request.params.username or whatever. So params, right here, I can say, okay, I don't really know the params, so I can use unknown. Okay, right here for the params, and they are optional. Okay, now here what we are going to do is return this data. So I'll return the session. So inside here in the requests object, we have the session object property, and it's going to be of type session data. We have body. Okay, so here we are mocking what we usually have in request. Okay, coming from Express. Remember, we've added something like this multiple times. So we are mocking what we actually need inside this request object. So there's this session property, body property, there's the params, and also there's the current user. Okay, so this is how our auth request mocking method will look like. Now let's create for the response. So auth mock response. This is just going to return response from Express. Okay, right here. And then what do we want to return? So first we create a response function, or maybe we make the object empty, equal to empty object as response. And then the two properties that we need mostly are, if we go to one of these, what we need is the status, and I think here we usually use JSON. Okay, status and JSON. So I'm going to set res.status equal to jest.function. Okay, dot mock return value, and then I'll pass response, and I'll do the same thing for JSON. Okay, mock return value, and then this function will return response. Okay, so what we're doing in this function is just to mock what we actually need. We need, remember, whenever we are sending a status code, we are using res.status. So we are mocking it as a jest function and returning this response object, and then we're doing the same for JSON, and then we return this. Okay, so with this now we have our mock file. In the next video we start creating the test for current user.